Welcome back and enjoy the story. The fluorescent lights of Metropolitan Trust Bank cast harsh shadows across the marble floor as Evelyn clutched her worn envelope. Her weathered fingers traced the edges of the government grant check, $7,800. That represented a lifetime of dedication to education. The frayed cuffs of her navy coat caught on the counter's edge as she approached, and her scuffed shoes made soft, squeaking sounds against the polished stone. After 3 connecting buses through Chicago's morning rush, she finally stood before the teller, her back straight despite the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Snow from outside had melted on her coat, leaving dark stains that she hadn't noticed in her haste to make the appointment on time. The young teller's expression shifted as his eyes traveled from her tired appearance to the check amount. His brow furrowed, and he tapped several keys before looking up with barely concealed suspicion. Evelyn noticed his hesitation, the way he held the check at arm's length as if it might contaminate him. She had seen that look before, in grocery stores when her card was declined, in restaurants where she counted coins for a cup of coffee. But this felt different. This felt like judgment. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the sudden silence, each second stretching like an eternity. Other customers in line behind her began to shift impatiently, their whispered complaints adding to her growing discomfort. Victoria Hayes approached with the precision of a predator. Her stilettos clicked against the floor in a rhythm that seemed to announce her superiority. Her perfectly tailored blazer and immaculate makeup formed a sharp contrast to Evelyn's humble appearance. The branch manager's smile was as artificial as the plants adorning the bank's entrance. She glanced at the check, then at Evelyn, her expression shifting from professional courtesy to thinly veiled disdain. "There seems to be some irregularity with this deposit," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume to attract attention from nearby customers. The way Victoria held herself, the slight tilt of her head, spoke volumes about her assumptions. To her, Evelyn was clearly not someone who belonged in this pristine banking environment. Evelyn's heart sank as she fumbled for the grant documentation in her frayed handbag. Her fingers shook slightly as she produced the official letter, its edges worn from careful folding and unfolding. "It's a grant for educators," she explained, her voice steady despite the growing humiliation. "I've taught at Lincoln Elementary for 27 years. Victoria barely glanced at the paperwork, her dismissive wave making Evelyn feel smaller with each passing second. The other customers began to stare, their whispered conversations creating a buzz of judgment that made Evelyn's cheeks burn with shame. She could hear fragments of their comments. Suspicious. Doesn't look right. Probably fake. Each word felt like a needle pricking her dignity. As Victoria instructed her to wait aside, Evelyn felt the familiar weight of invisibility settle upon her shoulders. She watched as well-dressed clients were ushered to private offices, offered refreshments, and treated with the dignity she had once taken for granted. Her knees ached from standing, her stomach empty from skipping breakfast to catch the early bus. The marble beneath her feet seemed to draw the warmth from her body, leaving her shivering in more ways than one. She had spent decades nurturing young minds, staying late to help struggling students, using her own money for classroom supplies, and now she stood like a suspect in her own financial institution. The hypocrisy felt suffocating. This same bank had once celebrated her students' achievements in local newspapers, had sponsored school reading programs she had organized, yet now they treated her like a fraud. The humiliation deepened as minutes stretched into an hour. Other customers came and went, their transactions completed with smiles and handshakes. Evelyn watched a businessman in an expensive suit walk in and immediately receive VIP treatment, despite carrying a check for a smaller amount. The security guard's watchful eye made her feel like a criminal rather than a customer. She noticed how Victoria pointed in her direction while speaking to other staff members, their glances filled with suspicion and judgment. Evelyn's reflection. In the teller's glass showed a woman worn down by years of giving, her eyes dulled by exhaustion, and now shame. She had once been a respected member of her community, a teacher who parents sought out for their children. Now she was reduced to this moment of humiliation, standing in a bank lobby while others received the courtesy she was denied. What made it worse was the gradual realization that her appearance had condemned her. Her coat, passed down from her late sister, told a story of financial struggle. Her shoes, resoled 3 times, spoke of priorities that put student needs before personal comfort. Her handbag, purchased at a thrift store 5 years ago, contained lesson plans mixed with unpaid bills. These were the artifacts of a life spent serving others, yet here they were used as evidence against her character. The injustice stung deeper than the embarrassment. Around her, the bank's marble columns and brass fixtures gleamed with wealth, a stark reminder of the divide between those who had and those who served. But have you ever experienced or known someone who's faced such unfair treatment? Share your thoughts in the comments. The unexpected arrival of Darren Matthews changed everything. The glass doors swung open with a burst of cold air, and he rushed in with his phone pressed to his ear. His designer suit and confident stride marked him as someone accustomed to respect and attention. But as his gaze swept the lobby, it stopped, abruptly on the figure standing near the counter. Time seemed to freeze as recognition dawned on his face. The phone slipped from his ear as he stared at the woman who had changed his life 30 years ago. "Miss Evelyn," he whispered, his voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and something deeper, gratitude long overdue. The businessman who had commanded respect wherever he went suddenly looked like a 10-year-old boy again, transported back to a classroom where patience and kindness had saved his future. Evelyn looked up, her tired eyes struggling to focus on the man approaching her. There was something familiar about his walk, the way he held his head. When recognition finally came, it hit her like a wave. Darren, she whispered, using his chosen name. The boy she had helped struggle through dyslexia, the child who had sat in her classroom after hours while she patiently taught him to read, now stood before her as a successful man. The transformation was remarkable, but his eyes, those same, determined eyes she had seen grappling with words on a page, remained unchanged. Memories flooded back. The afternoons spent with flashcards, the breakthrough moment when he finally read his first complete sentence, the tears of frustration that had turned to tears of joy. Darren's expression darkened as he took in the scene. The woman who had saved his academic life stood aside, like she wasn't worthy of service. His jaw clenched as he approached Victoria Hayes, his voice cutting through the lobby's ambient noise like a blade. "Why is this woman standing here unattended?" The authority in his voice made several customers turn to watch. Victoria, maintaining her professional facade, began to explain about suspicious documents and verification procedures, but Darren's expression grew stormy with each word. He listened with growing incredulity as she detailed her concerns, each excuse revealing the depth of prejudice that had governed her treatment of Miss Evelyn. The same check that had been questioned, the same documents that had been deemed suspicious, all because the person presenting them didn't fit Victoria's narrow definition of worthy. The confrontation intensified as Darren's voice rose. "You judged her by her clothes, by her appearance, by your own prejudices," he said, his words cutting through the lobby like a surgeon's scalpel. The gathered customers listened in stunned silence. "Let me tell you about this woman." His voice softened but retained its strength. "When I was 10 years old, I couldn't read a single word. While other kids played, while my parents worked, Miss Evelyn stayed with me every single day after school. She saw potential when everyone else saw failure. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." The lobby fell completely silent, hanging on every word. "When my mother was dying of cancer, Miss Evelyn came to our house with groceries, with homework help, with the kind of care that kept our family together." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Darren continued, his voice growing stronger with each memory. "She wrote recommendation letters that got me into college. She attended my graduation when my own parents couldn't. She has touched the lives of thousands of children, turned them into doctors, lawyers, teachers, business people." He paused, looking directly at Victoria. "And you treated her like a criminal because she doesn't wear designer clothes or carry a platinum card." The shame on Victoria's face was palpable. Other bank employees who had overheard the conversation began to lower their heads, embarrassed by their institution's behavior. Darren straightened, his executive bearing fully evident now. I am Darren. Matthews, CEO of Metropolitan Trust Bank. The words hung in the air as staff members' faces shifted from confusion to horror. Victoria Hayes stepped back, her confident facade crumbling like a house of cards. And this woman, he continued, turning to Evelyn with reverence, deserves to be treated like royalty, not just today, but every day for the rest of her life. The transformation in the lobby was immediate. Staff members who had ignored Evelyn now scrambled to assist her. The security guard who had watched her with suspicion now stood at attention, his face flushed with embarrassment. The moment that followed was electric with possibility. Darren turned to Evelyn, his voice gentle now, filled with the respect she deserved. "You won't need to deposit that check," he said, his eyes soft with emotion. "I'm creating the Educator Honor Fund today, starting with an account in your name, $100,000, as a small token of appreciation for all you've given." Evelyn's legs nearly gave way as the magnitude of his words sank in. The sum was more than she had ever dreamed of, enough to secure her retirement, to fix her home to live with dignity. But more than the money, it was the recognition, the acknowledgement of her worth that brought tears to her eyes. Around them, the lobby erupted in spontaneous applause. Other customers, moved by the story they had witnessed, began to clap. Some had tears in their eyes. The businessman who had received VIP treatment earlier approached Evelyn, apologizing for not speaking up. An elderly woman who had watched the entire scene unfold told her granddaughter about the importance of teachers. The moment transcended mere justice. It became a celebration of values often forgotten in the pursuit of wealth and status. Victoria Hayes was quietly escorted from the building, her career ending as swiftly as her judgment had been rendered. The transformation continued beyond that single day. As photographers arrived to document the creation of the Educator Honor Fund, Evelyn found herself at the center of a story that would inspire thousands. Local news crews captured the moment as Darren presented her with the first scholarship in her name, designed to support teachers like her. The bank's executives announced policy changes, ensuring all customers would be treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance or account balance. Training programs were implemented to address unconscious bias among staff. The bank's mission statement was rewritten to include values of respect and inclusion. Evelyn's story spread far beyond Chicago. Social media shared her tale. Newspapers across the country picked it up, and teaching organizations celebrated her as a symbol of education's unsung heroes. Letters poured in from former students she hadn't heard from in decades, each sharing how she had changed their lives. The Educator Honor Fund grew rapidly as donations flowed in from grateful families, successful former students, and people inspired by her story. What had begun as personal humiliation had transformed into a national conversation about respect, dignity, and the value of educators. Years later, the Educator Honor Fund had grown to support thousands of teachers across the country. Evelyn, now comfortably retired, spent her days mentoring young educators and visiting schools to share her story. She established teacher appreciation programs, scholarship funds for students in need, and support networks for struggling families. The day that had begun with humiliation had transformed into a movement celebrating the unsung heroes of education. As she looked at the framed photo on her desk, herself and Darren at the fund's 5th anniversary, she smiled, knowing that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest transformations. The ripple effects continued to spread. Young Darren, inspired by his mother's work, established a non-profit organization supporting teacher professional development. Victoria Hayes, after losing her job, underwent sensitivity training and eventually became an advocate for respectful customer service. The bank became a model for inclusive business practices, and Evelyn's story was used in training programs across multiple industries. Most importantly, thousands of students received better education because their teachers received the support they deserved. In her twilight years, Evelyn often reflected on that cold Chicago morning when prejudice had nearly broken her spirit. She remembered the shame, the humiliation, the feeling of being judged by her appearance rather than her contributions. But she also remembered Darren's voice cutting through the silence, defending not just her, but the dignity of all educators. The boy who couldn't read had grown into a man who could see past appearances to the soul beneath. Their story became a testament to the enduring power of education, the importance of treating everyone with respect, and the transformative nature of gratitude and justice. The final chapter of Evelyn's active career wasn't written in that bank lobby, but it was the moment that ensured her legacy would inspire generations of educators. The Educator Honor Fund continued to grow, supporting teachers, improving schools, and recognizing the crucial role education plays in society. Evelyn's name became synonymous with dignity, perseverance, and the belief that every person deserves respect, regardless of their circumstances. The bank manager, who had judged her by her coat and shoes, had inadvertently created a moment that celebrated the richness of character over the poverty of prejudice. As Evelyn celebrated her 80th birthday, surrounded by hundreds of former students, many now successful professionals, she realized that the day of humiliation had become the catalyst for her greatest triumph. The students she had taught, the lives she had touched, the respect she had finally received, all had been amplified by that moment of adversity. The Educator Honor Fund ensured that her story would continue to inspire and support teachers long after she was gone, transforming one woman's humiliation into a lasting legacy of honor and respect. Congratulations, type 7 in the comments, so I know you stayed with me until the end. Leave a like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. See you.